TikTok restoring service to more than 170 million American users yesterday after a 14-hour shutdown on Sunday. The Chinese-owned app failed to secure a U.S. buyer before that, but President-elect Trump coming through to keep it running. Here's what he wrote on Truth Social, quote, "I'm asking companies not to let TikTok stay dark. I will issue an executive order on Monday to extend the period of time before the law's prohibitions take effect so that we can make a deal to protect our national security." A pop-up on the app reading this: "As a result of President Trump's efforts, TikTok is back in the U.S." Here is Donald Trump yesterday.
"And as of today, TikTok is back." I said, I'll approve, but let the United States of America own 50% of TikTok. I'm approving on behalf of the United States. And the United States will do what we call a joint venture. And there's no risk. We're not putting up any money. All we're doing is giving them the approval. So whether you like TikTok or not, we're going to make a lot of money.
Some Republican lawmakers taking a hardline stance, though. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, Nebraska Senator Pete Ricketts are out with this joint statement. Here's what they write. Now that the law has taken effect, there's no legal basis for any kind of extension of its effective date. For TikTok to come back online in the future, ByteDance must agree to a sale that satisfies the law's qualified divestiture requirements by severing all ties between TikTok and Communist China. House Speaker Mike Johnson also supports a true divestiture. Joining me now, attorney and American Frontier Strategy CEO Mehek Cook. Mehek, good morning to you. Your thoughts on these latest developments?
Good morning, Cheryl. It's great to join you today. Look, we always knew that the Supreme Court was going to make sure that this ban stayed in place. There's a lot of Americans today that are very confused. They think that the Supreme Court decision was about free speech, and we have to continue to say two important words: national security. That is where America is today, to make sure that we continue to secure our country from national threats, and China is enemy number one. So when you look at what President Trump is doing, he's still following the law, because there is a legal provision that says that president may delay if there's significant progress on a divestiture deal. So we'll have to see what President Trump has in store. I think 90 days is enough time, significant time, for a divestiture deal and for somebody in the United States of America to have ownership of that platform and ensure that national security comes first.
Mehek, we're going to have Kevin O'Leary join us in the 8 o'clock hour. He's one of the, of course, leading bidders for TikTok, and an offer is on the table. Jonathan Madison, you yourself are also an attorney. I'd like to get your take on this legal challenge we're getting from Tom Cotton and Ricketts.
Yeah, I think it's really important here because they brought up a point in terms of this 50% ownership interest, this joint venture potential, and Mehek, you could even probably speak to it, but the fact is 50% ownership of what? A joint venture of what? Are we talking about the platform? Are we talking about the algorithm? We know we're not talking about the algorithm, otherwise we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. So the question is, where does this actually go? And then just, I guess the last question, just on that vein of thought, you mentioned that there was a time frame, the 90-day time frame and whatnot. The law actually does say potentially, I think the president could have a carve out to where he could extend that just enough. Perhaps if there's adjudication, I think he might have an ace up his sleeve if he wants to do something.
Well, I have to agree with you there. I mean, I think that if the president can show that there's actual facts and there's actual people that are coming to the table and there is a deal that's going to secure national security interest, then we're going to see a lot of movement. And I don't think when we talk about a divestiture deal, it has to be the app itself, because we need to understand what this data is being collected for, if it's being collected, what it's being used for. Security concerns are paramount. If we have an American company, American investor that is ensuring security, I think at the end of the day, it's a win-win for Americans. So President Trump isn't going to sit here and talk about algorithms today and some of the nuances. What we know is this app deserves security and a lot of careful execution if we're going to keep it lawful in the United States.
I don't know, you guys, I have to say this. David Marcus writes on FoxNews.com that the fact that ByteDance refuses to sell confirms that it's a CCP operation and that their goal is to, of course, This is a way to harvest the private data of Americans, including younger Americans, think kids, and that is the mission for them to get more access to, well, to Americans in general. But let's talk about, you're in D.C. Obviously, you're normally here with me on set, but of course, today is the inauguration, and Donald Trump is going to be sworn in, 47th president of the United States. He's going to return to the White House for another 4 years. Ceremony begins about 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. The swearing in around noon, of course, inside. He is vowing to make sweeping changes through a series of these executive orders. Here he is discussing all those plans last night. Watch.
I will describe in my inaugural address tomorrow. Can you believe it? Tomorrow. It's been a long 4 years. Nasty. It's been a nasty 4 years. My administration will take immediate and decisive action to confront every single problem America faces and put our nation back on the path to success and greatness. Within hours of taking office, I will sign dozens of executive orders, close to 100 to be exact. We will not waste a single moment in delivering on our promises to the people.
Mehek, what do you expect to see first today?
This is such an exciting and historic day, Cheryl. I think you and every single American has waited 4 years. Sounds like 40, but 4 years of peace, prosperity, and excitement for President Trump to get back to that White House. And I expect a lot of executive orders, but the one thing that every single American has asked for is making sure that our border is secure. We are looking for that executive order that shuts down the border, remain in Mexico policy, and then we're going to start pushing to end birthright citizenship. Those are very important and critical issues, and mass deportations. People are celebrating this because we're going to have less criminals in the United States of America, so we can start focusing on what matters the most. America first, Americans first. And I also have to say, Cheryl, President Trump will do his work in terms of executive orders, but I am counting on Congress to ensure that they pass laws to make his efforts permanent. This can't be all for nothing, where President Trump does a lot of work the next 4 years and Congress sits back and just waits. We need progress from them too, and we need it now.
Agreed. Mehek Cook, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.